Hello, everyone. I am Tom Malingo, one of the co-founders of Brandjectory, along with my lovely wife, Susan Bryanton, who will be on the call in a moment. But we are here today with Mark Bennett, who is the Chief Business Officer and Legal Officer for IDLife. And he is going to talk to us today about working with, building relationships with, understanding how to work with a 3PL and the things that you need to know and understand when you do work with a 3PL. A couple of housekeeping details. We will have about a 35-minute presentation here. We will take questions along the way, and at the end, please put your questions in the chat box. And if they're pertinent to the topic at hand, I will intervene and let Mark know that. If those of you who are new to Brandjectory or don't know us, Brandjectory does meetings like this, webinars like this once a month, free and open to everyone. Last month, we had one on inventory management. Next month, we'll be talking about exit strategies. The following month, we'll be talking about trade spend. We invite you all to continue to join those. If you're not on our mailing list, please let me know. I can always be reached at tom@brandjectory.com for any questions you have about this call or about Brandjectory. For those who don't know Brandjectory, we are an education and engagement platform for emerging brands in the CPG space. We work with about 100 brands and about 700 investors in our network, about another 100 folks who come to our meetings as mentors and industry experts. And our goal is to give you the education that you need to build a successful CPG business and understand how fundraising works in the CPG environment, but then also to meet on a regular basis, work on a regular basis with industry experts and investors to build relationships, to continue to understand how CPG works, what investors are looking for. And we do that through a series of meetings that get you engaged with experts, get you the chance to practice your pitches with investors, to hear directly from investors and meet in small rooms with them, and attend classroom sessions around fundraising. We do all this in order to provide you a service where you can grow over time on a very simple and affordable subscription service. And we do offer some extra services to help you move forward with your investing process, should that be what you need. So with that, we have a number of people here. Please, if you're not a speaker, keep your phones muted, your machines muted. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bennett, as I mentioned, the Chief Business and Legal Officer of IDLife, who works with a number of different brands as a 3PL. But Mark's background, he'll tell you, but he basically built a 3PL because he didn't like the way 3PLs work. So he's going to tell you the ins and outs of contracting, working with them, and continuing to grow with them and have good relationships, and make sure that you understand how to stay close to your customer in this environment. So with that, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will keep you informed of any questions that come up.
Is there any way so I have like a quarter tank of gas.
Please mute your phone. Please mute your phone.
Just tell me what you need.
I just need money for gas.
Okay, done.
Awesome. Okay,
Bye.
I love you.
All right, now we're ready to get started. Again, please mute your machines if you're not speaking. Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Yeah, everybody, I'm going to share my screen. Sometimes this plays nice, sometimes it doesn't. So Tom, please let me know if for some reason it's not playing nice, and I will go to a different format to share, but hopefully everyone can see that.
Looks good, Mark.
Perfect. All right. So I needed to start this by explaining to everybody a little bit about IDLife and who I am and what we are. So IDLife is a sports nutrition company. We started about 11 years ago. We have a customized supplement platform. The reason why that is important for this group is because it's customized with over 3.9 million possible outcomes. We did not have the option but to build a fulfillment warehouse from ground up when we started, because you can't use a 3PL in the process of trying to do customized orders, because they're basically being built on a minute by minute basis. So we built it from ground up. Then in 2020, the world kind of changed a little bit right around March 15th. And a lot of things happened to us. We were doing genetic testing at the time. But our genetic testing lab got commandeered by the state of Washington to become a COVID testing center. The problem with that was they were not a medical kitting, medical device, medical distribution warehouse. They were a lab, and they needed a partner. And I had a fulfillment warehouse. So we started trying to help them find 3PLs and found out very quickly that that wasn't going to work. We were going to build one from from the ground up during that time period to basically help that customer out. And since that time, through the development of our program and the development of building out a platform, I got to know the space extremely well. My background, just so you know, 25-year trial lawyer before starting IDLife 11 years ago. So I have a very extensive legal background, used to do a lot of things in the less than truckload freight forwarding side of logistics. 3PLs wasn't that much different. The one thing I will tell you is this presentation today is going to sound like I'm extremely negative on the 3PL industry. It's not necessarily that I'm negative, it's just that there's a lot of gotchas. And the whole purpose of the presentation I want to give you today is to basically make you well informed so you go in with open eyes. The other thing I have to say, simply because I am a licensed Texas attorney, that nothing that I'm saying in this presentation should be construed as legal advice. Basically, I'm giving you my opinion based upon experience, not my legal opinion to provide any type of guidance to you or your business. First, the thing that you need to know is the basic steps of third-party logistics. Step one is your business is going to send finished goods to the 3PL. Now, there are some 3PLs like ours, direct fulfillment, that will do kitting for you at an extra fee, extra cost. But for the most part, you're going to send a finished good. That warehouse is then going to receive your products, log them into inventory. Hopefully, they give you visualization to your inventory. Then the e-commerce orders are going to come in to you through the 3PL. They're going to be packed, they're going to be shipped, and your customers are going to get them. That's basically how 3PL services work. The whole concept behind this is the warehousing of your inventory, the order fulfillment side, and the shipping and receiving part are all taken care of by that 3PL. Now, one of the questions that I get all the time, in fact, it was one of the questions that Tom asked me in preparation for this presentation, is what size does my company need to be to consider a 3PL contract? Well, the thing I will tell you is it's less about size and more about what margin you have to give up in order to use a 3PL, because there's a pretty hefty price and cost associated with using a 3PL, as I'll show you. What I mean by that is if you're running on an extremely low margin item, it may not be beneficial to you to even consider a 3PL, because there's some average cost that you're going to have, and you have to do the analysis of what that cost per unit is going to be. On average, the cost for a 3PL is going to be somewhere between 5 and 15% of your bottom line gross revenue. So as long as you're willing to give that up, and you're probably in the market for using a 3PL. If you're not, you're going to have to figure out how to do fulfillment on your own. So it's those types of things. And remember, that cost is absent the actual shipping expense. Shipping is a dollar for dollar type expense, though I will show you in here how some companies and some 3PLs actually have what we call a cost plus model when it comes to shipping. So negotiating a 3PL agreement, the typical, and I put agreement in air quotes here for a reason. Because the typical agreement actually includes multiple different things. Usually you have something called a master services agreement.
Mark, just a heads up that the
Yeah.
presentation is not advancing.
I didn't think so. That's what I thought. So what I'm going to do is I'll do it this way. Now you should be able to see it.
Yep, that works.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah. It's one of those things where Keynote and Zoom sometimes don't play nice. That's why I said, let me know if you don't see it. All right, so the reason why agreement is in quotes is because you typically have multiple different agreements or contracts as part of what is the overall agreement. The master services agreement, or the main document, you are going to be told in the beginning is a form document that everyone signs. Do not believe that statement, okay? Because basically 3PLs don't want to change. And there are certain 3PLs that simply will not change their MSA. And you're going to have to decide, is that something I'm okay with or not okay with? And I'm going to show you some things that are in MSAs that you may or may not like. Now, the statement of work typically covers what you guys have negotiated as part of the sales process of what the 3PL is going to do for you. So those are all the different aspects of what they're going to handle. Then you have something called the service level agreement, or the SLA. Some called it the standards of performance, and they do it as an addendum to the SOW. The service level agreement is going to be the level of service you're asking for. So that can be everything from how your product is going to be packaged, how it's going to be placed in what type of box. It's going to be whether or not you're going to put a specialized letter to your customer, whether or not you have inserts on certain types of orders or combination of orders. Whatever your service level is going to be, that's going to be covered in that document. And don't worry, we're going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail in just a second. The other thing that's going to be covered in there is the pricing of all quoted services that you guys have agreed on. And then you have a host of other legal clauses such as warranty and guarantees, limitations of liability, warehouseman's liens, and termination clauses. I'm going to go through some of the more important clauses for you to consider when you're negotiating these contracts because there are some potential gotchas in there if you're not paying attention. So the things that we need to pay close attention to is that you need to sit down and truly validate that the deliverables, services, standards, and pricing meet your company's objective. And you need to ask very specific questions, especially when it comes to pricing, because it's the onesies, twosies, and things that are going to catch you. And you'll see those as we go through the presentation. But remember, you are giving up the customer experience, if you will, because remember, your customer experience isn't necessarily your product, it's how they receive your product. And that first reaction that they're going to have is however that product was delivered to them. And that's part of what you're negotiating. Remember also that the conversations that you had with the sales team are not enforceable unless they're actually in the contract. I always love when people say, well, don't worry about it. I mean, this is just a general statement. We always do this. You see that very last statement that I have in this. You only need a good contract when you need a good contract. As a 25-year trial lawyer, I can tell you it's always those things that you don't think that are going to be the problem become the problem. So if you desire a service to be in the contract, make sure it's actually in the contract. Just know that the more services you demand in a contract, the cost is going to continue to go up. So you have to pick and choose there. The other main thing I will tell you is that I see a lot of small businesses that are, penny wise, pound foolish. And what I mean by that is I would always recommend that you hire a good lawyer. And if not also a 3PL consultant to help you in the contracting phase. Yes, there's added cost to that, but you're normally talking about an agreement that is going to last several years. And failure to spend the money on the front end could cost you a lot more on the back end. There are attorneys out there that do specialize in this area. I highly recommend that you find a specialist, not just a general attorney, because if they don't understand some of the contracting provisions and things that you might need, they probably will miss some of this, even though they may be really good at other things in the law that they do. Questions to ask. These are just general. We'll go through some more as we go through the presentation. First, how will cost increase and be limited annually? Now, I say this because in the sales process, especially smaller 3PLs that are trying to get volume, in other words, they're trying to build their client base, they're going to make a lot of promises on price. And if you haven't negotiated what the upward price limitations are for, the next year, or let's say the next month, depending on what your contract says and how they can adjust prices based upon whatever measurable is involved in that contract, you could actually get stuck in a long-term deal that is price uncontrollable. The other thing that you need to make sure is how the contract can terminate by either party for non-performance. Now, I do say either party because remember, it can take 3 to 6 months to negotiate and put in place a 3PL agreement. That's important, especially if you have certain provisions that allow the 3PL to terminate the agreement for things like slow payment or non-payment. And then all of a sudden they terminate you overnight. And now you're having a gap in your delivery services and you're having to try to scramble and figure it out because you've already spent all the implementation and IT time trying to get an integration with a 3PL that is no longer your fulfillment partner. So something to be considered there. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're negotiating termination provisions for yourself for non-performance on the 3PL's part. Also, you want to make sure that you keep service performance high. Again, this is your customer experience. Okay. So SOW is your main document there. SOW and your SLA are the two things that you need. But you want to make sure that pricing for all services specified are in that sales process. Because remember, anything that is not priced and you ask for after the fact is going to have a different price that you didn't bank on. So anything that you want from a service level, make sure that it's actually in there, as well as any, client procedures or processes that are unique to your business, things that have to be done. Everything from, stickering the outside of a box to having a specialized barcoding system so that you do different things. Whatever it is you may need, make sure it's there. The other thing to make sure that you are aware of is the IT changes, integrations, and EDI needs. A lot of these 3PLs, if you're on WooCommerce, if you're on Shopify, if you're on things like that, super simple. But if you have a customized solution or a customized shopping cart integration engine, you could have constant increase in costs and fees associated with those integrations and maintaining those integrations. All right. There's a lot of words on this page, and I did this just in case people were trying to do captures, and because I know that's recorded and certain people are taking notes and things. So, I mean, I'm happy to provide this presentation after the fact. But on the SOW, the main point here is if it's important to you, get it into the contract. If it's something that you want, make sure that it's actually covered in there. Even if it seems tedious, make sure that it's there. Again, a good lawyer will make sure that the things that are important to you are actually in there. But remember, if a standard is not in that SOW, it's not part of your contract. And if you try to add it after the fact, it will cost you more. Now, here's the partial list of services that a statement of work should include. Okay, that's the advanced shipping notices for inbound transportation of the product. In other words, that's basically telling you that from, say, your manufacturer to the 3PL, your product is on the way, or telling your customers, hey, your product has shipped, things of that nature. Okay. Inventory management and storage. You're going to want to have visualization of your inventory. Transportation services being offered by the vendor. Who do they use? Do they use UPS? Do they use FedEx? Do they use DHL? Do they use last mile transportation, USPS? And then even if you think you're using UPS or FedEx, they could still be using the postal service for last mile just to save cost. Are you mandating and dictating which level of service you're using in that logistics portal, or do they get to pick and choose? I'll give you a prime example. If you have a customer that, I'm in Dallas, the Dallas area, say I've got a customer in Fort Worth, they want it tomorrow. So they're going to choose overnight delivery, or they're going to choose, 2-day air. Great. What you don't know is that I can put it on ground transportation, put it in the system today, and it'll actually be delivered tomorrow because of the distance. But so the customer and or you paid for overnight or air. And the reality is, the 3PL probably put it on ground and just pocketed the extra money. You have to negotiate those types of things in. Order fulfillment of e-commerce orders, how that's going to happen. The retail store replenishment of orders, how you're going to replenish, what kind of inventory you're going to keep on hand. Outbound shipping, how they're going to handle that. Returns are a big deal. Are they coming to you, or are they coming to the 3PL? If you have any kitting requirements, and then of course all the IT services, all of that should be part of your SOW. Now, IT integration scheduling. This is another big area where things do go wrong. Again, if you have a customized solution, this is usually where that happens. If you're, like I said, on one of the main e-commerce platforms, typically this is not an issue. The only thing that becomes an issue is your ability to get up onto their dashboard so that you can see your information. But the main thing is, as part of this integration scheduling, you want to make sure that there's certain things in place. First, that there's a good plan that's sufficiently detailed, not just high level. In other words, you want to know what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, and by what date. Is it detailed enough so that you feel comfortable not only with your responsibilities, but also with the 3PL's responsibilities? And then, of course, the main thing is you have to identify a go live date for the receipt of the first inbound product and for the shipping of the first order. Those are very, very important. And you want to make sure that there's consequences if that go live date is not hit. Because the whole idea here is you want to make sure that you have a good visibility of when this transition is actually going to take place. Now, I will tell you, most project plans, if you see here at the bottom, most project plans will include only the task required by the vendor to support the logistics services quoted. They don't like to put dates on things. The general rule of thumb in anything IT is it's going to cost at least twice as much as what they say and take 3 times as long. So again, contract for what it is your expectations are. And remember, a lot of the things that I'm talking about as part of this presentation are not things that you are going to find in a standard agreement, which is why I recommended the first getting a good 3PL lawyer and or consultant, because a lot of these things are things that you're going to have to actually ask for. So the length of the 3PL agreement typically is a 2 to 3 year long period. You can get a month to month, you can get a 1 year contract. Just know if you're going to ask for those, the prices that you're going to get quoted for your services are going to be exponentially higher. Main reason why is because integration costs, IT support components, basically warehouse integration in and of itself, there's a cost associated with that. And businesses are basically saying, okay, if I have a 3-year contract, I'm going to basically take those and stretch them out over the term of the agreement. But if you have a shorter term agreement, you don't have that longer term. So they're just basically going to upfront charge you for all of those things. That's why the contracts typically cost more. The other thing to remember is that on a length, facilities only have a certain fixed capacity. Okay, so one of the things you need to know is which 3PL am I going to be working with? Because if I have a small business, but I'm going to a 3PL that deals with a lot of very large companies, you're going to be a very small fish in a very large pond. So your problems and issues may not become their problems and issues, if you understand what I'm talking about once you're there. So understand who you're working with. Just make sure if you're going to enter into a long-term agreement that it is a win-win for both parties. Typically, agreements when they're first sent to you are going to be very one-sided on behalf of the 3PL. That's why you need to negotiate these things. And then it's also not uncommon to see optional or automatic 1 or 2 year renewal terms. The first thing I will tell you when you enter into any contract, okay, again, this is not legal advice. This is me giving you my opinion. You enter into any contract, okay, calendar right then and there the date of notice of termination on your calendar so that it tickles you. 30 days before you need to let them know it's terminating, put it on your calendar. I don't care if it's 3 years from now. The whole reason behind doing that is it triggers your brain to pull it out and say, do I want to continue to do this? Because if you don't, by the time, guess what? It could auto renew for another 3 years. And now you're stuck. So you don't want that to happen. So general rule of thumb is to always put that on your calendar if you're not already doing that. Price increases. This is a fun one. Again, in the sales process, they're going to say a lot of things and they're going to promise a lot of things. And then the next year is going to come up. We're going to see inflation of 12%. And all of a sudden they're going to use inflation as the reason why you just got a 20% increase in your prices. I will give you a good indication of something that has happened in the last couple of years. 2 years ago, I think it was UPS that raised their rates almost 20%. FedEx this year, I think it was 17%. There's a lot of those types of increases that are just unavoidable. Those guys are monsters. There's not a lot of competition. They're going to charge what they're going to charge, and they're going to pass through that cost to you. What is manageable is the cost of your 3PL services. So understand the difference between logistics price increases that are uncontrollable and 3PL costs, which are a little bit more manageable. So you want to make sure that you are tying the price increases to something like a ceiling. Can't rise above 2%, 3%, something like that. I would not fall for the, hey, we're going to tie our price increase to the consumer price index of some, Wall Street initiative. Because if you do that, you could actually be in a real bad situation, especially in the environment that we're currently in. And then, of course, make sure that you have this as part of your agreement so you have the protection. Now, they're going to want downward protection as much as upward protection. Just have that as part of your conversation, please. Now, this one is for you. I literally put this together. I did a lot of industry research just to kind of see what the standard is right now. This is kind of the prices that I'm seeing in a lot of the, standard, what I'm going to call, hey, here's our 3PL agreements out there. Remember, 3PL contracts are volume-based. The higher volume you have, the better pricing you can get. But this is kind of the standard that you're looking at. The reason why I'm giving you these costs, again, remember what I said, 5 to 15% of your margin is going to be given away on a per order basis in order to use a 3PL. That's just kind of what the general average is. But these are the things that can actually start adding up pretty quickly. Like when you look at pick and pack, okay, that $3 for B2C and $3.75 for B2B, usually what you have on a pick and pack cost is a per item basis. And sometimes you'll have, if you negotiate, a maximum order. So say that you have on average 5 to 7 items in each one of your orders, and they're 50 cents a piece, but my max any order is $2. You can negotiate those types of things, especially if you have multiple small items. You can do those types of things. But again, I just wanted everyone to kind of see what the standard costs are right now. But remember, if you're storing your product at the 3PL, you're getting charged for the storage space that you're taking up on a monthly basis. And remember, a pallet cost is if you're taking a pallet space. So say that you only have 2 pallets of inventory, but you have 4 pallet space. You're paying for 4 pallets, even if you only have 2 pallets of the inventory on site right now. All right, the SLA. Okay, so now we've gone through the master service agreement, which is typically a form document. Your SOW, which is kind of the work side. Now this is the service level agreement. Okay, these are the things that what they're going to perform and how you want them to perform and the level of service that they're going to provide is all spelled out. Just remember, standards which are too high can radically increase the price. So you can, when you're having the smaller shop and you're doing everything yourself, like our business at IDLife, brand new customers get a handwritten thing from somebody in the warehouse thanking them for their order, and then those things are amazing. They have a great customer experience to them. But if a 3PL is going to do that for you, there's a cost associated with it. So make sure that it's there. Make sure that you consider what penalties should be in place for failure to perform those standards. I can tell you there's humans involved. Mistakes are going to happen. Plan for them. I always tell people we always go into contracts trusting and we always get out of contracts wishing we hadn't trusted. That's just me as a lawyer. I'm sorry. I'm a little pessimist when it comes to those things. Here's some key standards, though, that you should consider. Order fulfillment cutoff times. In other words, if I receive an order by noon, it should be fulfilled same day. Make sure those are there. Return processing, including customer credits and refurbishing. How are those going to be handled? International orders, if you're doing international orders, is that going to be same day, next day? How's that going to be handled? Error rates for order fulfillment. Okay, what is an acceptable error rate? 0 is not realistic. Just so you know, again, humans involved, so understand that part. Quality inspection requirements. This is a big part of something that we do at Direct Fulfillment that a lot of companies don't ask for and they don't understand. What I mean by that is actually receiving inventory as well as shipping inventory. You want to make sure that there's quality standards in place for receipt, because especially if you're going to go straight from manufacturer to the 3PL and you're basically they're managing that for you, you want to make sure that there's some type of quality standard there for receipt, because once they've received it, there's only a certain amount of time for them to reject it if there's something wrong. And if you're not going to go do the inspection yourself, you have to spell that out. And then the inventory shrink allowance. Now, I will tell you, industry average is 0.5%. That's the average shrink. Shrink is basically it just disappeared off the shelf. That could be paperwork issue, that could be theft, that could be any number of things. But just realize shrink is a real thing. That's kind of the main thing here. But remember also that you want to make sure that 3PL service agreement establishes those. The best way you can make sure that they're being met is you set up this monthly call. I always say that management should always have a monthly call with the 3PL, high level management discussion. How are we doing? Look at the KPIs, look at the reports. And we're going to get into KPIs and reporting and dashboards and things like that in a second. But the main thing is make sure that you're having those monthly touch points, because I can promise you, if you're not, then the 3PL is just going to keep doing what they're doing without saying anything because, hey, you're paying the bill. So make sure that you are taking the time to actually have those conversations with folks. All right, 3PL processing and value-added services. Are there specific procedures important to you and your customer that you expect? If they are, they have to be in the agreement. Some common requested procedures are standard for customer order appearance of shipping boxes. This might include shipments without excessive tape, paper box sizes, gift boxing. You see that very last point down there, I say dimensional weight shipping containers. Like it or not, there are things in logistics called dim weighting. Okay. What I mean by that is if your box, you've decided that hey, I want a 5x9 box because, that's just what I want for my product. That's great. But just realize that FedEx is going to charge you, as is UPS and USPS, a price that could be greater for a 5x9 box than what would be charged for a 5x10 box. There's things called dim weighting. And when things take up a certain amount of space or they're awkward, you get charged based upon the next dimensional size that box would have taken up. So you might want to get with a logistics expert when you're designing the packaging, or you're especially if you're going to mandate certain types of packaging, to make sure that your box isn't getting charged $12 when you could get the same shipment in a different size box for $8 if you just change the dimensional weight of the box. Other things in there are ensuring inventory that is dust free, certain packing, inserts, packing materials, flyers, things of that nature. Contract termination and renewals. Okay. Does the 3PL's performance contractual standards, error rates, service levels, blah, allow you to terminate the agreement? Now that's important, okay? Because remember, you typically are entering into long-term agreements here, okay? If you do not have a termination provision that allows you to get out of the contract, if you continuously are running into what I'm going to call chronic customer relation issues as a result of your 3PL, you're going to be stuck with a bad 3PL for a long time. So make sure that you are putting in there, things that are triggers that would allow you to terminate. Doesn't mean you have to terminate, just gives you the right to. So make sure you negotiate those in. Remember also those auto renewal clauses. We've already talked about that. Just know they're typically 60 to 90 days before the end of the contract. I have seen contracts of late that are 6 to 9 months before the termination of the agreement. Again, pay attention to those things. They can actually end up costing you. It takes, again, we've talked about this. It takes months to get a 3PL up. It could take you roughly 9 to 12 months to get your own fulfillment center up and running, just so you know, if you're planning that out, if you decide you want to go that route. Make sure the termination language protects both parties. The whole idea behind this is, I want to make sure people understand this last point, because this is the one where people get caught and they don't understand it, which is warehouseman's liens. Okay. If you get into a dispute with your 3PL over payments, say that it's a slow pay, anything, or a termination provision, realize that most of the time they have a lien on your inventory, which means you're in a dispute and they literally have a lien because of lack of payment or whatever against all of your goods that they're currently warehousing for you. If you don't understand the warehouseman's liens rules in your state, or where your 3PL is located, please make sure you get some advice on that and you protect yourself accordingly, especially for payment related issues. Warranty of service, putting your order fulfillment in the hands of an outside party is a big move. It's scary, okay? Because now all of a sudden, again, you've given that customer standards, that customer experience to somebody else. Make sure the standards that you want are in that SLA. And then your attorney needs to advise you on warranty of service to protect your company. In other words, warranty of service is something that's actually in that SLA document. What warranty are they providing you that the services that they've agreed to are actually going to be met? Again, that warranty of service provision is probably the biggest one in that SLA. Make sure that you understand that one. Inventory. This is also a very big issue for people to make sure that they're aware of. Inventory is probably one of the largest balance sheet items that a retail and e-commerce business has. Most agreements state that the inventory is purchased by the client for their use and selling to the customer. Okay, usually the client must carry insurance and against loss and damage on that inventory. Here's the question that I have for you. Does your policy cover offsite inventory warehousing? I will tell you that it doesn't always. Okay, so make sure that if you are deciding to go 3PL, that you actually do have insurance that covers offsite warehousing, or you actually have what's called warehouse insurance. I can't tell you the number of people I've heard of that got caught here because something happened at the 3PL. There was water leak, a fire, or something else, and they didn't realize they didn't have offsite protection. So make sure that that's part of your policy. The other thing to know is that the client also pays for transportation directly from the 3PL, and it's usually FOB doc is what you'll see on your document. In other words, the 3PL says I'm responsible for things that happen inside the four walls, but as soon as it hits the dock onto a truck, it's now back to being your responsibility. The other thing about that warehouseman's lien, remember, is that can also be used as a tool if you get into a slow pay situation or any type of invoice dispute. What I mean by that is, say, for instance, you're running at you have payment terms of 15 and you're on day 33. Don't be surprised if your 3PL says, well, nothing else is going to ship until we're paid and we're, exercising our lien on your inventory if it's not taken care of by X date. So they literally can do some things that you may not be aware that they have the power to do. The other thing to know is that the 3PL has no responsibility for claims or warranties involved with the product. That all still belongs to you. So just know that. You cannot try and track that away. Intellectual property protection. Make sure, if you hear nothing else, please do this. Before discussions with a 3PL, get an NDA in place. Okay, make sure it's a mutual NDA. It's protecting you. It's protecting what you do. It's protecting how you do it. A lot of these 3PLs, remember, you are telling them, where your manufacturer is, where they're going to receive that manufacturing from, what product it is, how it's distributing, who your customers are, where they're sending it to, how you're marketing it, and everything else. It's not difficult once somebody knows all that if you don't have protections in place or you have not properly protected your intellectual property and all of that protectable information, for them to basically decide that they don't need you anymore and now they can do it on their own. So again, make sure that you have the legal protections in place to protect not only your information, but also your know-how. The other thing, obviously, down here at the bottom, when in doubt, clearly label all your company's copyrighted and confidential materials. That's a secondary after the thought, but get the intellectual property agreement and the NDA in place. All right, IT services and reporting. Make sure that you get agreed upon analysis and reports. What kind of reports are they going to provide? Make sure you ask management what kind of reports they want. I can't tell you how many times I have seen agreements in place where, hey, here's our standard reports. And then management says, well, but I'm looking at these following things because these meet up with our KPIs. And now all of a sudden you go back and you ask for those things and they cost more. Negotiated on the front end. Yeah, because new requests for reports and functions always are going to cost. And then, of course, the implementation charges, talk about those in the beginning. There is integration charges that are going to be incurred as part of this. Identify those costs up front, okay, because they can vary. I would try to negotiate a fixed cost for integration because if you don't, then it's going to be on an hourly basis. And those hourly rates can be anywhere from $125 to $200 an hour. So I would try to get that as a fixed cost in the beginning. Invoice and payment terms. These are negotiable, but there are some certain things that you need to be aware of. There are the implementation activities. Just talked about that. Negotiate a flat fee if you can. Advancement fees, just so you know, it is not unusual for postage to be what we're going to call an evergreen retainer. In other words, if you give a forecast that says you're going to ship 1,500 packages a month, and they're going to say, okay, on average, it's $10, you need to keep a $15,000 evergreen retainer for postage because postage is usually, cost. Now, as you see that second bullet, it's also not unusual for pass-through costs to be marked up, i.e. cost plus 5%, cost plus 10%. Make sure that you're asking those questions. Am I actually paying cost or is there a cost plus associated with it? A lot of warehouses and 3PLs are going to get you a 20 to 30% reduction on what shipping cost would typically be for you simply because of the volume that they have. It's a substantial discount. That's why they charge the plus. So just know that is cost plus 10% may still be 15 to 20% less than what you're paying because you don't by yourself have the volume to get the kind of discounts that they have. Other thing you need to know is are they invoicing you weekly, monthly? What are the payment terms? What are the late fees and interest charges? And then, of course, again, down here at the bottom, for the fourth time in this presentation, because I want to make sure people see it, hear it, and find it in every different possible way that they can, In the extreme cases of slow payment, 3PL may reserve the right to stop processing, in other words, stop shipping your items, and also exercise their warehouseman's lien against your inventory. So just know that that is something that they do have a right to do in most states. They also can require certain 3PLs of size can basically mandate minimum volume requirements. So if you see these, that basically means you're going to have a monthly order volume minimum. So this gets into forecasting, which we're going to talk about in just a second. There's a lot of companies that want to give a very aggressive business forecast to make themselves more attractive to a 3PL in the hopes of getting better pricing. Just realize if you do that, there is a possibility that the 3PL could negotiate in a minimum order volume for you and say, okay, fine, 1,500, that's amazing. But if you drop below 1,200, your minimum that you're going to pay us for is 1,200 a month, 1,200 orders. So just realize that business forecasting needs to be conservative and accurate, not, just to make yourself look better. They can also look at total monthly spend minimums, and then of course monthly storage minimums. Again, just because you have 2 pallets on the floor doesn't mean that you're not going to have a 4 pallet requirement. Certain 3PLs, it's just, hey, you have to take up X number of space if you want to do business with them. Those are the ones that are well established, have a very good reputation, have all the reporting that you want, everything else that are, they've been around a long time, not as hungry as others. They want your business, but they don't want it enough to not at least get the minimums of their space requirements out of it. Dispute resolution of invoicing. This is always a fun one. You need to make sure that you negotiate your audit and review rights up front for these things. I will tell you that 3PL invoicing is complex, convoluted, and hard to understand. Main reason, because if they see it, touch it, think about it, move it, or play with it, you're going to get charged for it. That's basically the general rule of thumb when it comes to a 3PL. So you're going to have all kinds of service label charges on those bills. You need to be able to audit those on a monthly basis, and you need to have somebody in-house that's actually willing to do that. The other thing is, if you do dispute an invoice, every contract with the 3PL is going to say you have to pay the undisputed portion while you negotiate out the disputed portion. I highly recommend in these situations that you negotiate what I'm going to call an ADR, or alternative dispute resolution protocol and procedure, which is, the 2 business contacts will first start. If that doesn't work, it elevates up to management. If management can't agree, then you have a third party independent that's at least going to try to listen to both sides. That's usually what we call a mediation before we get into litigation and arbitration. It's going to save you a lot of money. Normally, you're going to get it resolved in the first 3 phases without having to actually get lawyers and things involved, because if you do, then obviously those disputes can get quite pricey. The $50,000 clauses. I always tell clients this. I have told clients this forever. Again, not legal advice. I'm just giving you some of my opinion here. People blow by the governing law provisions in contracts. Okay. I will tell you that if I had a client in Dallas and all of a sudden that client says, hey, just agreed to a contract with a dispute in, dispute resolution in Oklahoma. What that means is I now have to hire my local Dallas attorney, because that's the guy I trust. That local Dallas attorney now has to hire an Oklahoma attorney, because he's not licensed to practice in Oklahoma, who has to get him admitted to practice on that particular case in Oklahoma. And guess what? Now you're not just paying your guy, you're paying the Oklahoma attorney to do all of that, hence the $50,000 clause. You're going to pay more if you basically just blow through this. Now, we'll tell you, most 3PLs are always going to argue that, hey, you came to us, we're here, this is where the law prevails. Just realize, if you can get that change, you save yourself a substantial amount of money. If you can't get that changed, I would always recommend that you try to negotiate Delaware as your choice of venue. Why? It's equally burdensome on both parties. So guess what? Less likely for them to get really invigorated, because they're not going to get to play in their backyard if you guys get into a dispute. So that's my opinion, again, for you. The other thing to make sure you pay attention to is the assignment clause, also a $50,000 provision, because if you think that I don't really care if they assign as long as I get my same level of service, your service could drop off tremendously, which could impact your business in $50,000 plus in losses as a result of it. So make sure that that assignment clause is a termination provision in the event of an attempted assignment without your permission. Okay. You don't want to do business with somebody you don't know. Inventory shrink allowance. We talked about this. This is not going to be in a standard agreement. You're not going to find this anywhere. This is something you're going to have to ask for. Okay. So again, talk about this. The industry standard is 0.5%. Okay. You need to make sure you talk about shrink. Because if you don't, you're going to all of a sudden find that, you have 3 to 5 to 7% shrink. And you're like, well, what happened to my inventory? And they're like, well, humans involved, paperwork, they're going to use all the excuses. There needs to be consequences attached to shrink. So make sure that's in there. Forecasting. Already talked about this a bit. Again, don't make yourself look better just to get a better price, because it will end up costing you in the negotiation. It is generally acceptable in the industry for you to have a rolling 13-week sales forecast. If you have a business that is seasonal, make sure you take that into consideration. If you're running some big promotion, make sure you let your 3PL know. You want to make sure that you are actually being very transparent with them on this. Again, conservative forecasting is great, but don't be so conservative that, you end up with a heck of a lot more volume than you otherwise have told your 3PL that you're going to have. KPIs and performance reviews. Now, this is for you. If you're not doing these things, you absolutely should be. What are your key performance indicators? Okay. Order fulfillment accuracy. How accurate are our orders? You want to make sure you're getting reporting on that. The inventory accuracy. When you ask for inventory or you're looking at the dashboard, how accurate is it? How often are you going to do a physical inventory count on site of your 3PL? And how does that match their reporting to you? On-time delivery. Cycle time. How long does it take to cycle through? And then now, of course, warehouse space utilization. You want to make sure that you're getting at least these things on a dashboard and that you're monitoring them as for the performance of your 3PL. Again, regular reviews with both parties to identify strengths, address weaknesses, and make necessary adjustments is acceptable. I would say that this needs to be done at least biannually. Remember, if you're having those monthly calls, you just basically schedule it up front to have these biannual reviews of how are things going, how are we meeting our KPI expectations. Hold the 3PL accountable for these things. And then the final tips on how to negotiate warehouse contracts. I'm just going to go through the highlighted points. Clearly define the requirements. Again, if it's important to you, put it in the contract. Don't just take somebody's word that says, hey, I think this is going to be okay. Or, we always do that. Don't worry about it. Again, clearly define it. Understand your pricing structures. Understand where all the pricing can come from. Do an analysis on a per piece or per order basis for yourself to determine whether or not this is going to meet your needs. Again, you're going to give up margin to use this. What kind of margin are you going to have to give up? Because if you don't understand that going into it, it could actually be a lot more than you expected. And it could actually be something that you couldn't afford in the first place. Flexibility in contract terms. Again, a flexible contract is great. Vagueness seems to always be the people's choice. And I will tell you, vagueness is where lawyers get involved. I like clean, clear language. The reason why is because you don't have to call somebody to figure out what it said, and two different people can't get a different interpretation out of it. So flexibility is great, vagueness bad. The SLA is going to have to clearly define what you want from a service level. Okay. Make sure that you take the time to actually spend a lot of time in that SLA document. And then, of course, negotiate volume discounts up front. Again, be conservative, but at the same time, negotiate in a way for your prices to get reduced if you start growing. Now's the time to do it. Because if you don't negotiate that in the beginning, guess what? They're not going to give it to you later on. They're just going to keep charging you what they're charging you. But if you get it in there, now all of a sudden, not only do you have a target, but you have a measurable KPI that you're basically trying to strive for to get to, because your prices are going to go down. So I hope this has been helpful. I try to go, again, high level. That's the 30,000-foot view from somebody who basically had to build a fulfillment center because we didn't have a choice, and then built a 3PL because when I was trying to find one for a very close client, we couldn't find one that met our needs, mainly because it was medical kitting and medical device distribution. which means you have to have FDA UL 820 certification and all kinds of other very technical aspects of things. And we just couldn't find a 3PL that could meet the quality requirements for us to get those things done without the cost being just absolutely exorbitant. So we decided to do it ourselves. So done both sides. But again, at the end of the day, what I wanted to do today was just kind of give everyone a general overview of contracting, working with a 3PL, but most importantly, things to watch out for. There are some great companies out there, and there's also some rarely bad companies out there. So know who you're doing business with, due diligence, ask questions, ask for references, but most importantly, go in eyes wide open. Tom, hopefully
Mark,
that was what you were looking for.
this was excellent. Thank you so much. This was really educational. We'll open it up to questions. I have a few to start us up in the few minutes we have left. Mark, are there any services or providers who, besides attorneys, who can walk brands through the process of setting up a 3PL?
If they want to set up a 3PL, that's going to be an attorney. If they want to work with a 3PL, there are 3PL consultants out there.
Okay.
Again, check references, talk to people that they have spoken to. Don't just take their, internet word for it, or the reviews of the person, because sometimes those reviews were self-written. Again, you want to talk to actual clients who've actually worked with a person and walk them through the process. There's usually what I usually tell people: if you're going to work with a consultant in your state, because there are very specific state laws that need to be adhered to, and different protections. And those consultants usually are people that had been in the industry for 20, 30 years, are retired from the 3PL industry, and now are just, it's kind of their side gig, if you will. They're working from home and they're just trying to help people through the process.
And along those ways, is it likely that a brand founder, a company, will have more than one 3PL based upon geographical delivery times and such? I mean, so this could be somebody could have multiple 3PLs depending upon the 3PLs that are necessary for them.
They absolutely could. I will tell you that keeping all your eggs in a single basket can be dangerous, as we all know. Typically, what you're basically talking about is the geographic delivery timetable. So, like for instance, being in Dallas, which is great, we touch 82% of the U.S. in 2 days. That's why it's so attractive to have somebody in Dallas. The other two main hubs for distribution are Atlanta and Chicago. Major airports near major distribution centers, and you touch a lot of the U.S. So it is not unusual. If you want to know where the main hubs for warehouse distribution are, just go on Amazon's website and look at the Amazon warehouse system, and you'll see exactly where every hub is and where you need to be, because Bezos has done an amazing job of building a warehouse system that basically allows him to deliver everything in 24 hours if he chooses to. So yeah, if you're big enough, by all means, you can do multiple 3PLs. Now, does not mean you're going to get the same level of service, and you're splitting your volume. So if you can find a single 3PL with multiple warehouses and you have that kind of volume, sometimes you will get a much better deal than if you split it into 2.
Thank you. And my last question is, I think in the terms of co-man, if you're going to change your co-man and you're starting to have problems, you usually need to be thinking 6 to 9, even a year out in terms of, where am I going to go next? I'm assuming the same holds true when you're working with 3PLs. If your contract's coming up, you're not satisfied, you need to be thinking about that well ahead of time, to be able to make such a significant change.
It takes roughly 3 to 6 months to get a 3PL contract in place, up and operational. Okay, so if you're thinking, hey, I want to change, typically you're talking a half year away, and I'm talking that's a kind of a best case scenario, because remember, even once you've agreed to the contractual terms, now you have integration. Again, integration is information, and information is technology, and technology costs twice as much, takes 3 times as long. It always does. Because if you try to do it faster, you can always do things fast and things will break, hands down. Now you have service interruption, now you have client disruption, and you have all kinds of business issues associated with it. So again, plan ahead. If you're not happy, make sure that you're far enough in advance that you're working to already move that solution along. But again, the best advice I can tell you is that on day 1 of entering into any contract, put in your calendar the day of which you need to go back and review that contract so that you're ready to terminate or give notice of termination if you choose to. because I can't tell you how many times I have seen people get renewed into an agreement that they had every intention of terminating, but they just assumed that meant they just had to terminate before the expiration date.
Excellent. We have a few more minutes. We can take a couple of questions. Certainly, if there's questions after this, feel free to send me an email at tom@brandjectory.com. I'll be happy to try to get him to Mark if he's open to that. But if there are any questions, please raise your hand or just jump in right now. All right. If not, then this recording will be made available. Mark was kind enough to say he will supply us with the presentation. I learned a lot in this event. I hope everyone here did. It was a lot to take in, Mark, but it was excellent. And I think I see smiles from some folks who probably agree that there was a lot to take in here. So I'm sure it will lead to questions down the path. Again, if you need to know more about Brandjectory, if you want to connect with Mark in any way, please go through me, tom@brandjectory.com, and we'll see what we can do for you. But certainly at Brandjectory, we're here to help you and here to continue to supply you with these kinds of events. A special thank you to Mark, to part of his team, Logan Stout, who you see in my graphic right there, will be joining us on April 10th for an excellent session. Logan is one of the founders of IDLife and has started lots of businesses and has garnered a lot of revenue for a lot of different brands and companies and different types of companies with his services. So this will be a very helpful event on April 10th if you want to join us. So with that and no other questions, we've used our hour well. And again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your interest, and a special big thanks to Mark. I can see he really lives what he does here. It's in his voice. And I think he actually, for all of us, cares about what we do. And I think that's the kind of people we need to be able to make sure we do things right. And so I'm very, very thankful and very grateful that he joined us today. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much.